The gunshot shattered the night silence, splintering wood as the bullet tore through the cabin's shutters. Nathaniel Reed's scarred hands tightened around his Winchester, the familiar weight of the rifle as much a part of him as the war memories that haunted his dreams. "Hand her over, Reed," the voice outside carried on the desert wind. "She don't belong with a Yankee like you." Nate's eyes, hardened by years of sun and violence, flicked to the corner where Elena crouched. The Apache woman held his Colt revolver with steady hands, her dark eyes reflecting the dying embers from the stove. No fear there, just resolve. "They ain't taking you," Nate said, voice low and firm as iron. "Not while I'm breathing." Arizona Territory, 1875, 10 years since Appomattox, but for some men, the war never ended. Nate Reed had come west with nothing but a discharge paper, a bum leg from Gettysburg, and government promises of 20 acres to any veteran willing to tame the frontier. What he got was hard-scrabble desert, where the soil fought every seed and water was scarcer than honesty. The land had claimed his marriage first. Sarah lasted 18 months before the isolation and brutal heat drove her back east on a supply wagon. "I didn't marry a ghost," she'd said, leaving Nate with his silence and his scars. For 5 years, he'd worked the land alone. Just him, his Winchester, old Charlie the horse, and the nightmares that woke him, sweating despite the desert chill. He'd built the cabin with his own hands, every rough-hewn plank a testament to stubbornness. He was digging irrigation when they came, 4 Apache warriors, appearing suddenly on the ridge like they'd risen from the earth itself. One led a 5th horse, a woman slumped in the saddle, hands bound before her. Nate's hand found his Colt, the same one he'd carried through Virginia mud and Pennsylvania blood. He didn't draw, but his fingers remembered. The lead Apache halted 10 paces from the porch. His face was etched with lines deep as dry creek beds, eyes black and unreadable as obsidian. "She broke tribal law," he said in clipped English. "She is exiled. Our tribe gives her to enemy as slave." The woman on the horse didn't raise her head. Her deerskin dress was torn at the shoulder, dark bruises visible on bronze skin. Her black hair hung over her face like a shroud. "I don't own slaves," Nate said, hands still near his holster. "Fought a war against that notion." The Apache's expression didn't change. Without warning, he pulled the woman from the horse. She fell hard to the dust, still bound, still silent. "She is your punishment now," he said. Then they were gone, dust trailing behind them like vengeful spirits. Nate approached slowly, knife in hand. The woman tensed but didn't move as he cut the ropes. When they fell away, angry red welts marked her wrists. Still, she didn't speak, didn't look up. "I'm cutting you free," he said. "You can go or stay. Your choice." She remained kneeling in the dust. Nate sighed, looking across the empty landscape. 50 miles to the nearest settlement, Apache territory to the north, Comanche hunting grounds east. "There's water inside," he said finally, "and food such as it is." He turned and limped back to the cabin, leaving the door open behind him. That night, Nate slept on the floor beside the door, Winchester within reach. The woman, he still didn't know her name, took the bed after much coaxing. She hadn't spoken, hadn't eaten, just watched him with eyes that missed nothing. By dawn, she was still there, sitting straight-backed on the edge of the bed, waiting. Nate made coffee, placed a cup before her. "You got a name?" "Nothing." "I'm Nathaniel Reed. Most call me Nate." She took the coffee with both hands but didn't drink. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said. "That's not who I am." For the next 3 days, they established an uneasy routine. Nate worked the land. She observed. He showed her how to find water cached in barrel cactus, how to set rabbit snares with mesquite branches. She learned quickly but remained silent. At night, he cleaned his Winchester, checking the action and oiling the stock with practiced motions. He caught her watching his hands, studying the weapon. On the fourth day, everything changed. Nate was mending fence when three riders approached from the south. Trouble wore different clothes in different territories, but it always had the same swagger. The lead rider wore a Confederate hat despite the heat. His beard was shot with gray, his eyes the pale blue of shallow water. "Well now, what do we have here?" The man's voice dripped false cheer. "A Yankee playing farmer?" Nate's hand drifted toward his belt. "This is private property." "Name's Jackson," the man said, ignoring him. "These are my associates, Cooper and Mendez." The men flanked him, hands resting on holstered revolvers. "Word travels in these parts, friend. Heard you acquired yourself an Apache squaw." Nate stood very still. "Heard wrong." Jackson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now don't be modest. I'm willing to pay. $50 is more than fair for damaged goods." "She's not for sale," Nate said. "And you're trespassing." Jackson's smile vanished. "You're alone out here, Yankee. Miles from anywhere. Be a shame if accidents started happening." "I've survived worse than you," Nate said. Jackson spat tobacco juice into the dust. "We'll be back. No man survives out here without friends." They wheeled their horses and rode off, dust billowing in their wake. When Nate returned to the cabin, the woman was standing in the doorway. Something had changed in her posture. She looked alert. That night, as Nate checked the perimeter before darkness fell, she finally spoke. "Elena." Her voice was rough from disuse. "My name is Elena." "Why do you help me?" Elena asked the next morning. "I bring danger to you." Nate was cleaning his rifle, fingers moving in the familiar ritual. Danger was already here. Men like Jackson don't need reasons, just excuses. "You are different from other white men," she said. "Why?" Nate's hands stilled on the weapon. For a moment he was back at Gettysburg, the air thick with gun smoke and screams. "Saw too much during the war," he said finally. "Watched men treat other men worse than animals. Over land, over cotton, over skin color." He resumed cleaning. "Promised myself I'd never become that." Elena sat across from him, watching his hands. "I refused to marry tribal elder," she said. "He killed previous wife, beat her until she died." She touched her bruised shoulder. "That was my crime." Nate nodded, understanding, filling the spaces between her words. "You know how to use this?" He offered her the revolver. Her fingers traced the barrel. "I can learn." He took her outside, set up empty cans on the fence, showed her how to hold the Colt, how to sight along the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger without jerking. "Breathe out when you fire," he said, standing behind her. "Steady your arm." She hit 3 cans and 6 shots. Not bad for a first try. "You're a natural," he said. Later, checking the perimeter, Nate found signs that turned his blood cold. Cigarette butts by the creek, horse tracks that weren't his, boot prints circling the cabin. They were being watched. That night, Elena helped him fortify the cabin. They barricaded windows, rigged twine around the perimeter that would rattle tin cans if disturbed. Nate loaded every weapon he owned: the Winchester, 2 Colts, and an old shotgun. "They will come at night," Elena said, checking the Colt he'd given her. "Probably," Nate agreed. "You afraid?" "No." Her eyes met his. "I am angry." Nate found himself smiling, the expression unfamiliar on his weathered face. "Good. Angry keeps you sharp." They dug a small trench behind the woodpile, giving them a defensive position if the cabin was breached. Nate shared battlefield knowledge from Virginia. Elena contributed tracking skills learned from childhood. "Why do you protect me?" she asked as they worked. "I am not yours." Nate drove his shovel into the hard earth. "Nobody belongs to anybody. That's what I fought for." Elena studied him, then nodded once. Something understood between them. The warning came just after midnight. A soft jingle from the eastern perimeter tin cans disturbed by an intruder. Nate was instantly awake, rifle in hand. Elena already crouched by the window, Colt ready. No words needed. Shadows moved outside the cabin. Two figures crouching low, approaching the rear door. Nate sighted through a gap in the shutters, squeezed the trigger. The Winchester roared. One shadow fell, the other scrambled back. Return fire shattered the window above Elena's head. She ducked, glass raining around her. Nate spotted a third man flanking from the north, rifle raised. Before he could react, Elena fired twice. The man staggered, clutching his shoulder. "Impressive shooting, Reed." The voice came from the darkness. "Jackson." But this is just the beginning. Dawn revealed their handiwork. Blood trails leading away from the cabin. No bodies, they dragged their wounded with them. But most disturbing was what Nate found by the creek. A moccasin print. Apache. "Jackson is working with your people," he told Elena. She examined the print. "Not my people anymore. But yes, these are Apache." The implications were clear. They faced enemies on two fronts. The next day, they repaired the damage. Nate replaced shattered glass with metal from old cans. Elena kept watch, proving herself as capable with a rifle as with a revolver. "We need help," Nate said as sunset approached. "I'm going to Dry Gulch tomorrow." Elena looked up sharply. "Alone, you are easy target, which is why you're coming with me." They rode out at first light, Nate on Charlie, Elena on a half-broken Mustang he'd traded for last spring. Both were armed. Both watched the horizon. Dry Gulch was barely a town, a collection of ramshackle buildings clinging to existence around a muddy watering hole. But it had a sheriff's office, a general store, and a saloon where information flowed as freely as watered-down whiskey. Heads turned as they rode in. A white man and an Apache woman, both armed, both alert. "Trouble," the stairs said. Nate dismounted outside the sheriff's office. "Wait here," he told Elena. "Watch the horses." Inside, he found not the sheriff, but a deputy he recognized, William Wilson, former sergeant from his own unit during the war. The recognition was mutual. "Reed," Wilson stood, surprise evident. "Thought you were dead." "Not yet," Nate replied, "though some are trying." Over lukewarm coffee, Nate explained the situation. Wilson's expression darkened. "Jackson works for the railroad," he revealed. "Central Pacific is pushing a new line through. Your land sits on their planned route." Nate's grip tightened on his cup. "And the sheriff?" Wilson looked away. "On railroad payroll. Most folks around here are, one way or another. So no official help." "Didn't say that," Wilson countered. "Thompson and Martinez are in town. Both served with us at Gettysburg." Nate remembered them. Solid men who'd held the line when others broke. "They owe you," Wilson added. "We all do, after Culp's Hill." An hour later, they left Dry Gulch with two additional riders. Thompson, a barrel-chested blacksmith with a Spencer carbine, and Martinez, lean as a whip and deadly with a knife. Elena studied them with cautious eyes but said nothing. The men, to their credit, treated her with the same respect they showed Nate. "Railroad wants your land," Thompson said as they rode. "They're not particular how they get it." "The Apache woman is just an excuse," Martinez added. "A reason to run you off or put you down." Nate nodded. He'd suspected as much. They reached the cabin by mid-afternoon. No signs of intruders, but the air felt charged, like before a lightning storm. "They'll come tonight," Wilson predicted. "Full force this time." They prepared methodically. Thompson reinforced the door. Martinez set traps along likely approach routes. Wilson and Nate established firing positions. Elena moved between them, loading weapons, suggesting adjustments based on Apache tactics. As darkness fell, they took their positions. Elena and Martinez covering the rear, Thompson at the north window. Wilson and Nate facing east, where the attack would likely come. The night stretched long. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human concerns below. The first shot came just before dawn, that gray time when night surrenders today. A rifle cracked from the ridge, the bullet splintering wood above Nate's head. "Here they come," Wilson shouted. Shadows moved across the yard. 8, maybe 10 men. Some wore cowboy hats. Others had the distinctive silhouettes of Apache warriors. Gunfire erupted from all sides. The cabin's defenders answered in kind, the air filled with smoke and the copper scent of blood. A window shattered. Thompson cursed, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. He kept firing. Elena's Colt barked repeatedly from the rear. "Two down," she called. A bullet found Nate's arm, burning a furrow across his bicep. He ignored it, sighted, fired. A man fell. The attack intensified. Someone threw a burning torch onto the roof. Martinez scrambled up to extinguish it while Wilson provided covering fire. Then came a moment's lull. A voice called out, "Reed, you're outgunned. Send out the woman and the land deed, and you walk away." Nate exchanged glances with his companions. Elena's eyes burned with determination. "Come get them yourself, Jackson," Nate shouted back. The response was immediate. Renewed gunfire, more intense than before. A bullet caught Wilson in the shoulder, spinning him against the wall. Thompson dragged him to safety while Martinez and Elena maintained fire. The attack continued for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Ammunition ran low. The cabin took hit after hit. Then unexpectedly, the gunfire slowed. Stopped. "They're pulling back," Martinez whispered. "No," Elena said. "They are regrouping." She was right. Moments later, a single figure walked into the open, hands raised. Jackson. "Final offer, Reed," he called. "The land or your lives." Nate stepped to the shattered window, Winchester leveled. "Neither." Jackson dropped his hands, reaching for his holster. Fast, but Nate was faster. The Winchester roared one last time. Jackson folded, a surprised expression frozen on his face as he hit the dirt. In the silence that followed, the remaining attackers melted away into the dawn light, carrying their wounded, leaving their dead. It took 3 days to clean up after the battle. 3 graves dug in the hard earth, 3 men who wouldn't return to families or homes. Wilson's shoulder would heal. Thompson and Martinez departed for Dry Gulch, carrying news that would spread through the territory. Nathaniel Reed's land was not for sale or taking. As sunset painted the western sky crimson, Nate found Elena by the new graves. She'd placed stones in a pattern he didn't recognize. "To guide their spirits away from here," she explained, seeing his questioning look. Nate nodded, respecting her ways. "I can take you somewhere safer," he offered. "Military post at Fort Huachuca, or east to New Mexico territory." Elena stood, brushing dust from her dress, a new one Thompson's wife had sent. "This is our land," she said. "We fought for it." "Our land." The words hung between them. Nate reached into his shirt pocket, withdrew a folded paper. The land deed he'd carried since coming west. Had Wilson witnessed this in town, he said, handing it to her. The document now bore 2 names, Nathaniel Reed and Elena Redbird. She stared at the paper, then at him. "Why?" "Because you fought for it same as me," he said simply, "and no one can take it from you now." Elena carefully folded the deed, tucked it into her dress. She didn't thank him, didn't need to. What existed between them had moved beyond gratitude into something stronger, respect. As darkness claimed the land, they stood on the porch, weapons ready, watching the horizon, not as owner and owned, but as warriors who had claimed their ground and would defend it together. The rider appeared the next morning, dust trailing behind his lathered horse. A mail courier from Tucson, bearing news in a sealed envelope. Railroad's not giving up, he told them, eyes darting nervously between Nate and Elena. They're bringing in Pinkertons next time, maybe even army troops. Nate took the envelope, broke the seal. Inside was a map of the planned railroad route, straight through his land, and an official notice of eminent domain. He showed it to Elena, who studied it with narrowed eyes. "What will we do?" she asked. Nate folded the paper, tucked it away. His hand found the Winchester, checked the action by habit. "Same thing we did before," he said. "Hold our ground." Elena nodded, a slight smile touching her lips. She checked her Colt, spun the cylinder with practiced ease. The courier departed, casting nervous glances over his shoulder until he crested the ridge and disappeared. In the distance, dust rose on the horizon. Riders coming, many of them. Nate and Elena shared a look. No fear, no hesitation, just determination. Side by side, they stepped back into the cabin to prepare. Whatever came, they would face it together, not because she had been given as punishment, but because they had chosen to stand as equals,